Picture this. It's 1:47 a.m. in a dimly lit Hollywood office, 1958. Empty coffee cups litter the desk. Cigarette smoke fills the air. And Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense himself, sits staring at pages that could destroy his career. The film that would become Vertigo was just days from shooting, but something was catastrophically wrong with the script. What happened in those desperate midnight hours would not only save the movie, but transform it into one of cinema's greatest masterpieces. This is the story of panic, brilliance, and the rewrite that changed everything. By 1958, Alfred Hitchcock had already carved his name into Hollywood legend. The man who gave the world Rebecca, Notorious, and Rear Window was under immense pressure to deliver another masterpiece. Paramount Pictures had invested heavily in what they hoped would be Hitchcock's magnum opus, a psychological thriller unlike anything audiences had seen before. But behind the studio gates, panic was brewing. The original script, adapted from Pierre Boileau and Thomas Narceic's novel, Ventre les Morts, felt flat, mechanical, devoid of the emotional depth that would make audiences care. Studio executives were growing restless. James Stewart, attached to star, had expressed concerns about his character's motivation. Kim Novak, the ethereal blonde chosen to play the mysterious Madeline, seemed lost in a role that hadn't yet found its soul. Hitchcock knew he was walking a tightrope. This wasn't just another film, it was his chance to explore the darkest corners of obsession, love, and psychological manipulation. The story of Scotty Ferguson, a retired detective suffering from vertigo, who becomes obsessed with a woman he's hired to follow, had the bones of brilliance. But bones weren't enough. The script needed flesh, blood, and a beating heart. The clock was ticking. Filming was scheduled to begin in just 5 days. The sets were built, the cast was ready, and the crew was assembled. Everything was in place except for the one thing that mattered most: a script that could carry the weight of Hitchcock's vision. Little did anyone know that the master of suspense was about to face his own moment of vertigo, staring into an abyss of creative uncertainty that threatened to swallow his entire production. As the California sun set on what seemed like just another day of pre-production, Hitchcock made a decision that would echo through cinema history. He locked himself in his office with screenwriter Samuel Taylor, and together they embarked on a journey into the night that would either save their film or destroy it entirely. First draft of Vertigo read like a police procedural gone wrong. Flat dialogue, predictable plot points, a love story that felt more like a business transaction. Samuel Taylor, the accomplished screenwriter who had penned The Naked City and Sabrina, had delivered what many would consider a competent adaptation. But competent was the enemy of genius, and Hitchcock knew it. The original script followed the novel's structure too closely, treating Scotty's obsession as a straightforward case of mistaken identity rather than the psychological labyrinth it needed to become. The character of Madeline Elster was written as a typical femme fatale, seductive but shallow, mysterious but not magnetic. The famous scene in the art museum, where Scotty first truly sees Madeline, was reduced to a mere plot device rather than the transcendent moment of recognition it would become. Most damaging of all, the script failed to capture what would become the film's central theme, the impossible nature of love itself. Scotty's journey from protector to possessor, from admirer to destroyer, was sketched out in broad strokes that missed the delicate psychological nuances that would make the story unforgettable. The transformation of Judy Barton into Madeline, the film's most haunting sequence, was treated as a simple makeover montage rather than a descent into madness. Hitchcock read and reread those pages, his famous profile silhouetted against the office window as he paced. He could see the film in his mind, the swirling camera movements, the lush San Francisco locations, the way light would play across Kim Novak's face. but the words on the page couldn't carry his vision. They were like a beautiful melody, played out of tune. The director's wife, Alma Reville, his most trusted collaborator and harshest critic, had already delivered her verdict. "It's not ready. Hitch, you know it's not ready." Those words haunted him as he prepared for what would either be the longest night of his career or the beginning of his greatest triumph. At 11:30 p.m. on that fateful Tuesday night, Hitchcock called Samuel Taylor into his office. The room was thick with tension and the scent of imported English tobacco. Taylor, a seasoned professional who had weathered many late-night script sessions, immediately sensed this was different. There was something in Hitchcock's eyes, a mixture of desperation and determination, that the screenwriter had never seen before. "Samuel," Hitchcock began, his distinctive voice barely above a whisper, "we have a problem. And I'm afraid it's a problem that could end everything we've worked for." The master of suspense, a man who prided himself on meticulous preparation and unwavering confidence, was admitting vulnerability. It was a moment that few in Hollywood had ever witnessed. Taylor listened as Hitchcock dissected the script with surgical precision, identifying every weakness, every missed opportunity, every moment where the story failed to reach its potential. But this wasn't just criticism, it was transformation. As the director spoke, Taylor began to see the film through Hitchcock's eyes, understanding for the first time the depth of psychological complexity they were trying to achieve. "Isn't just a thriller. Samuel," Hitchcock continued, his hands gesturing in the air as if he were conducting an invisible orchestra. "This is a story about the impossibility of love, about what happens when we try to remake another person in the image of our desires. Scotty Ferguson isn't just a detective with acrophobia. He's every man who has ever tried to possess what he cannot have." The confession continued past midnight, with Hitchcock revealing his deepest fears about the project. He spoke of his own obsessions, his relationship with his leading ladies, his understanding of the male psyche's darkest corners. This wasn't just professional collaboration, it was personal revelation, the kind of creative intimacy that rarely occurs between director and writer. As the clock struck 1 a.m., both men knew they had reached a crossroads. They could abandon the project, admitting defeat and potentially destroying careers. Or they could dive into the abyss together, rewriting not just a script, but the very DNA of what would become one of cinema's greatest achievements. The first order of business was to understand Scotty Ferguson, really understand him. The original script treated him as a straightforward protagonist, a decent man caught in extraordinary circumstances. But Hitchcock and Taylor knew they needed something darker, more complex, more human. As they worked through the night, they began to peel away the layers of Scotty's character like archaeologists uncovering ancient secrets. Here was a man whose fear of heights was only the surface manifestation of a deeper terror, the fear of losing control. His retirement from the police force wasn't just about physical disability. It was about a man whose entire sense of purpose had been stripped away, leaving him desperate to find meaning in something, anything, even if that something was another human being. The breakthrough came when Hitchcock suggested they approach Scotty's obsession with Madeleine not as romance, but as a form of artistic creation. "He's not falling in love with her," the director mused, stubbing out his third cigarette of the hour. "He's trying to create her. She becomes his masterpiece, his ultimate work of art. And like all artists, he destroys what he loves in the process of perfecting it." This insight transformed everything. Suddenly, the famous makeover scene took on new meaning. It wasn't just about changing Judy's appearance to match Madeleine's, but about Scotty's desperate attempt to breathe life into his own impossible vision of perfect love. The suit, the hair, the makeup, each detail became a brushstroke in Scotty's twisted masterpiece. Taylor scribbled frantically as Hitchcock paced the room, his creative energy now fully unleashed. They talked about control and vulnerability, about the thin line between protection and possession. They explored how Scotty's vertigo, his physical inability to reach certain heights, paralleled his emotional inability to accept love as it actually existed rather than as he imagined should be. Character who emerged from these midnight discussions was far more complex than anything in the original script. Scotty Ferguson became a tragic figure, a man whose greatest strength, his desire to save others, ultimately became his greatest weakness when applied to matters of the heart. If Scotty was the film's tormented soul, then Madeleine Elster was its ghostly heart, and she needed to be more than just beautiful. She needed to be otherworldly, haunting, impossible. The original script had made her too real, too accessible. Hitchcock and Taylor knew she needed to exist in a space between dreams and reality, between memory and desire. Working through their second pot of coffee, they began to reconstruct Madeleine as a figure of pure mystery. Every scene needed to feel like a half-remembered dream. Every line of dialogue needed to carry the weight of unspoken secrets. She wasn't just a woman pretending to be possessed by a dead ancestor. She was the embodiment of every man's impossible romantic ideal. The art museum scene underwent complete transformation.